Hey everybody, this is Today's Students, Tomorrow's Talent. And today I am joined by Haley Glover, my colleague from Lumina Foundation. Hey Haley, thanks for joining us today.
Hey Dakota, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for coming on the show.
Anytime.
So what are we talking about? I know you brought me something today.
Yeah, well, we're really excited. Over the last several years, Lumina's been working really closely with many employers to try to figure out, they are the largest consumer of education. They probably have the most at stake when it comes to having a well-educated workforce. And so how do employers really think about their contributions to our talent agenda? Employers spend hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars every year on education and training. And what we're trying to do is figure out how can we capitalize on those investments, make them more geared towards supporting people who have been marginalized from education systems before, and get every train moving in the right direction, which is toward post-secondary attainment.
And you've been working on and with employers for quite some time now?
Yeah, I said several years. What I meant was like 6.5. So yeah, we've been doing this for quite a while, and I find it to be one of the most exciting things that I personally do in my role. We can see the change very quickly because it's not just about getting more students into the pipeline, getting more students through credentials. It's about changing the employer policy and practice. And they can do that themselves. And so what we've been really focusing on is developing the information, the practices, the ideas, the evidence that employers need to be able to say yes to education. And they are then able to change their own programs and practices to make sure that it's more responsive to the needs of their workers and more in line with the kind of talent they're going to need for the future.
Well, it sounds like a really great topic for today's conversation. And I know
think
you,
so.
Yeah, and you brought in some of your partners to talk with us. And so to help us unpack some of the national trends around the topic, why don't we jump into our conversation with John Kaplan from Corvantis Consulting. All right, well, welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Hi, my name is John Kaplan.
Great. And John, I know that we're really glad you're on the show. And you were formerly the Chief Learning Officer at Discover. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into that role?
Yeah, sure. So I've spent my entire career in learning and development. I actually started my career as a high school teacher. I taught economics and government in inner city Oakland and got really inspired by the power of education to change lives. And so I got an opportunity to open a charter school with Arthur Andersen. It was a public-private partnership, and I did that for a few years and got really interested in the power of education that was being done in the corporate sector. And I moved into the corporate sector, and I spent most of my career working in corporate America in learning and development.
That's great. And Haley, how did you come across John here?
Oh, a series of fortuitous introductions. I want to say that one of our mutual partners introduced me to you, and then it was sort of magical. John's a kindred spirit in so many ways, and we've been really grateful for your partnership over the last, I think it's maybe 4 or 5 years now, John, right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah. So he's bearded now. He wasn't bearded when we met, but looking rakish and...
Yeah, much to the chagrin of my entire family, including
well, again, we're really grateful to have you on the show. And in particular, we've kind of dedicated today's show to talking about the role employers play in post-secondary education and talent development and cultivation. And we're excited to talk to you just to get to help us understand the broad marketplace, to kind of cast a national vision for what the intersection looks like between education and in corporate America and employers in particular.
Yeah. So, John, maybe you could get us started. You've been in this space for such a long time, and you've been paying really close attention, not only to what you were doing at Discover and in your other roles, but also what's happening nationally. Can you just ruminate a little bit on the sort of trends that you are seeing in terms of employer-supported education?
Sure. So I think there's probably this intersection in between the talent that we're getting when we hire people versus the talent that we see that we're going to need in the coming 3 to 5 to 10 years. And I think the talent that we're getting, we see increasingly people coming to us with either enormous college debt with no college degree or no attempt to go to college, maybe a course or two. And we recognize that there are a set of transferable skills that come through the college experience. And it doesn't have to be a residential college. It doesn't have to be a 4-year sort of college experience. But the process of taking intensive classes that require you to synthesize information, to collaborating, to communicate with peers around complex issues. I mean, that actually does something to someone's capabilities. And what we're seeing is that we have more and more people who come into the corporate sector with less and less than that experience. And that's entirely based on college affordability and the difficulty that more of America has in getting into a meaningful college experience. And on the flip side, when you start looking at the talent that we're going to need, we see the business world getting increasingly complex all the time. And that's a combination of technology that is changing the way we do business and increased competition that has to do with globalization and automation. And I think when you look at the types of roles that are going to be in corporate America 3 years from now, 5 years from now, I mean, it's hard to see there being a lot of entry-level positions that are going to put people in the position to gradually learn the skills to promote up through the corporate ladder. And so we see that we're going to need to develop people more as they come to us with less and less experience.
I think that is so insightful, and you're addressing the affordability issue in a really sort of pragmatic way, right? When an employer is thinking about, well, what can they do to make sure that more entry-level employees have the kind of pollination that a college education provides, you're able then through tuition assistance programs, through corporate education models to really defray the costs of going to college for the folks who need it most. And so maybe you could tell us about the program that you developed at Discover. What did you do in that last year or so before you started your own company?
Well, it actually was a journey, and it actually started probably 4 or 5 years ago when we started working on the Lumina study that assessed the ROI of our tuition reimbursement program. And we had long known that our tuition reimbursement program had enormous benefits to our employees, but there's a lot of friction participating in that program. So our tuition reimbursement program had existed at Discover for as long as anyone can remember. And essentially what it was is that our employees had to go out and find a college, they had to enroll in the college, they had to pay for college, and then they had to submit their receipts to get reimbursed by Discover. And Discover would reimburse up to certain amounts. We'd reimburse up to 90%. But the challenges around finding an impactful program were really significant. The challenges around paying for college and then waiting to be reimbursed were really significant. The challenges around dealing with the ups and downs of your lives with relatively little support, those were really significant. And Haley and I and the Lumina Foundation worked on an ROI study in which we tried to quantify the ROI of our tuition reimbursement program. And what we found, which was really no shock to anyone at Discover, was that every dollar that we invested in tuition reimbursement had significant returns in terms of our talent management costs. So we estimated that for every dollar invested, we returned that dollar plus another $1.44 in profit, or rather than profit, in avoided talent management costs having to do with attrition or absenteeism, or having to hire people from the outside when there were positions that opened up, they were hiring the company. I mean, there was a variety of things that went into that. And what we were able to do pretty quickly is take that study and leverage it to make the case that we needed to invest in this program. And we did a variety of things over time. But about a year ago, we launched the Discover College Commitment. And that was a fully paid for online bachelor's degree. There were 7 degrees from 3 universities. All employees are eligible on day one of employment, and Discover pays directly to the universities. We pay all of tuition, required books, supplies, fees, and we'll even provide a tax gross up in the case that there's a tax liability at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, and you did so many things that sort of went above and beyond not only what you were doing before, but even sort of the emerging promising practices. The day one eligibility transfer that you made was so interesting because I do think that Discover was probably the first one to go to day one. And you did that for a really strategic reason, right? Which was that you were losing so many of your frontline workforce within that first 6 to 12 months. Is that right?
Yeah, right. I mean, the first year in any job is the most difficult. Your culture, you're getting a sense of the work. You're probably, it's just when you're starting, and your skills are probably more rudimentary than they'll ever be in when you start a company, or you start in a company. And we just had high attrition rates in year one, and so what we saw is that we had such an enormous retention benefit from people participating in this program that it just didn't make any sense to make people wait a full year in order to participate in the program. And so we got rid of that. We said on day one. It actually also really helped us in our talent acquisition space. So when you reach out to potential employees and you say, "Hey, come to Discover. Here's the compensation levels, and here's the work you'll be doing, and here are the benefits. And oh yeah, if you're interested in getting a degree, you can start day one in our Discover College Commitment Program."
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm really kind of excited and following the path of this really interesting innovation. And so, when you were emerging and sort of reconsidering the tuition reimbursement program and shifting into the college choice program, you had the ammunition of the ROI study in your pocket, where you were able to sort of get your financial leaders in particular to be able to say yes to the innovations that you were planning. As you're working now with other companies, what are the biggest limitations to starting a strong education program within the company, do you think?
I think there are probably two big limitations. On the finance side, there are a lot of companies, they just don't even know where to start. Like, how would I put together the case? And what I always tell people is just go to the Lumina website, grab our study, and see if that works. Because, honestly, I think that most executives are looking for an excuse to do something great for their employees. And these programs make so much sense. It could be that if you say, this is what Discover did, and there are a bunch of other studies on there. Cigna did a study. I think there are a bunch of different ones that show basically the same thing. But if you bring those studies to your executives, they might say, that's all we need. We'll take it based on the work that's already been done. So I think that's one thing, is where do I start? And I would argue that that's the first place to start. Just use the work that's already been done. The second thing that I would say is the big barrier is that connecting these programs to a strategic talent imperative is really difficult for a lot of companies. And for Discover, because we had a large frontline workforce that we used as a feeder pool for management positions in the company, it was really easy to make the case that Discover needs superlative customer service, and we think we can get that by better execution in the talent acquisition market. When we say we've got this wonderful program, and we use this pool of employees to feed management, and we believe that to the extent that we can get people with better skills in frontline manager positions and promote them to the organization, that's better for our execution across the board. I think that was such a compelling argument that it was hard to say no.
Yeah.
And I think too, some of the times what we'll hear, from a variety of organizations and sectors, earlier you were talking about some of the barriers that people face, affordability, life gets in the way. And I think, it is not uncommon for an employer or even a higher institution or, a government agency, whatever it is, to say, that's a whole lot of not my problem. And you've mentioned, doing the math on the ROI. You've mentioned kind of the individual return, the non-financial return that a company can experience with improved customer service and improved kind of morale and other things like that. How do you address an employer that says, listen, all those barriers that students are facing, that people are facing to get into higher education are just really not my problem?
Boy, I mean, I think that corporations need to increasingly partner with their workforce to achieve great results. I mean, all the data suggests that there are so many options for employees, and employees, I mean, this is not a time when we have a 7% unemployment rate, where really the choice that an employee has is either work for this company or be unemployed. I mean, there are an enormous number of great companies that are hiring all the time. And I think to the extent that you say that my employee's problem is not my problem is the extent to which you say you're going to settle for talent that can't find jobs anywhere else. So I think increasingly companies recognize that they have to be a great place to work. And I think the wisdom now is that great cultures make great companies, and one of the ways that you have a great culture is that you partner with your employees to ensure that they can execute well at work, and they can have a great work-life balance.
Yeah. As a complement to that, John, I was looking through your data the other day, and what we found was not only did it pay off for the company, you had that 144% return, but the people who were taking part in the programs were getting promoted at 21 percentage points higher than non-participants. Their marginal wage gains were higher, so it was really paying off for them too. So this kind of program is not a only benefit for a company; it's a benefit for everybody. And if we extrapolate out, it's the company, it's the community that you live in, and of course, it's the nation. You're really contributing to the national goal as well.
And I think that there's certainly been a lot of employers in particular that have moved from taking this kind of providing this kind of educational support from a corporate responsibility to a much more tangible place, whether it is about talent development, whether it is about economic development. And John, I guess I'm curious about what you think the vision of the future is going to hold. Certainly there are small, mid-sized, and large companies that are learning from your work, learning from what other employers have been doing, adopting new programs, redesigning, as you've said, traditional programs that they've had on the books for years to be a little bit more responsive. Do we expect to see more of that? Do we expect to see more of that from particular sectors?
Yeah, I would say that right now, with $1 trillion federal deficits, for as far as we can see, the role of the federal government will continue to diminish. And as the role of the federal government diminishes, you get less funding in education across the board. And less funding in education means that either you're going to have to deal with people who are increasingly ill-prepared for a job environment that is more and more complex and more difficult, or you're going to have corporations and state and local government trying to figure out how to pick up the slack. And what I see more and more companies that are interested in investing in their employees through these type of education assistance programs. And I see states and municipalities trying to figure out how do we increase the level of degree attainment across the board, so that companies are interested in coming to into our city or our state because they know that there is an educated workforce that can succeed in their environment. And so I'm actually very optimistic that we're going to have more of the work around education being done closer to where the employee is actually working on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I would totally agree with that assessment. And I think, John, part of the legacy of your work at Discover and now in Corvantis, right, is going to be capitalizing on this movement that we're seeing amongst employers and helping more of them not only do the work, but do it right and do it with the student in mind, do it with the worker in mind. It has just been a joy learning from you over the last 4 or 5 years and working with you. And I'm just so excited for what's coming next in your life.
Well, thank you very much. The feeling is mutual.
Yeah. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight and looking forward to continuing our work together.
All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good one. Haley, what a great conversation we just had with John.
Yeah, John is exceptional.
Yeah.
I've just loved working with John and so many other things. So, a couple of the things he said I think are worth underscoring within this broader conversation. He mentioned, as employers are considering, what they might do, on one hand, they don't even know where to start. And on the other hand, connecting it to that strategic talent imperative can sometimes be difficult, right? And what we've found is that, that is absolutely true. And when employers are starting to think through, well, what could they do? There's now this growing body of evidence and practice, some of which we've supported and some of which is happening really organically out in the field. We would really encourage folks to go out and start talking to places like Discover, like Cigna, like Walmart, like McDonald's, and to start connecting with the organizations that are leading on some of those practices. Because now you're not doing it alone. There's a lot of great stuff out there. And then thinking through on the strategic talent imperative, I think any company that employs a larger frontline workforce is going to find a lot of value in thinking about education as not only a benefit, but education as an investment in the company's future.
And I think, too, the notion that you're not alone. I really appreciated where John ended, saying, this is something that employers can do. They need to be working with their local partners, their states, their municipalities. What I was hearing him say is, we can't wait for someone else to come and solve the problems for us, and we can do it. And here's some models to replicate.
Yeah, nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's very clear. And, companies, of course, have their own internal bureaucracies and people they have to answer to. But I think every company has got talent as their top priority for competitiveness in the future. And then thinking about, how a company can consider its own talent ecosystem, support the people who need to be supported, promote folks from within rather than going out and, an old colleague from a long time ago used to call it buffalo hunting, unicorn hunting, where we're all searching for that elusive, magical person. Cultivating that talent from within can be a really cost-effective strategy, as well as John pointed out, a business-effective strategy.
Well, and I'm grateful to continue our conversations today. You brought in some of your employer partners that I think are doing just that. And so we're going to start with Rob Lauber from McDonald's. So why don't we listen to our conversation?
I'm Rob Lauber. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Learning Officer at McDonald's Corporation here in Chicago, Illinois. I've got responsibility for global learning throughout our system and our education initiatives. Been here almost 5 years.
Great.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Haley, I know that you and Rob go back some time, I'm sure. When did you?
I want to say, Rob, we met maybe down in Louisville, Kentucky in maybe 2015. Doing an event, something like that. But since then, we've run into each other in a dozen different venues. And I keep thinking, wow, this guy is so great. And you're so willing, Rob, to share your stories and the lessons you've learned and about your programs. And so maybe we can start with that.
Yeah, sure. Archways is basically got multiple components to it. It starts with education. It starts with English language learning. Is the first program that we offer under the Archways umbrella. It's called English Under the Arches, believe it or not. It's been around actually since about 2007. And really what it is a face-to-face 8-week or 12-week intensive program where McDonald's system employees that work for our franchisees come together with a ESL certified instructor and learn English against a sort of a prescribed curriculum that McDonald's has that helps them work more effectively in our restaurants in speaking with English and dealing with English-speaking customers and those kind of things. We've had probably, more than 10,000 people now through that program across about 10 years. And, people say it also builds, sort of a lot of confidence on the life skills side in terms of their ability to engage with doctors and family and friends and, general, what would I say, acculturation into the society here in the U.S., those kind of things. So it's a great confidence builder for people. What's probably unique about that program is they actually get paid for doing that because it's tied to sort of success in the job. So we pay them to actually learn English language skills. That's English Under the Arches. That's the first program. The second one is really geared towards people who had to leave high school for one reason or another, either dropped out because it was challenging for them, or circumstances required them to get a job and support their family or themselves, kind of thing. So we have an online career online high school we partner with to be able to work with, and people can get their high school diploma online, basically in an accredited way as we're going. We've had a few thousand people do that. We're graduating almost, actually a little more than one person per day now.
That's great.
In the US. So good traction there. The third one is really about more traditional education tuition reimbursement kind of scheme with a bit of a twist. The twist is that we will apply apply training that they receive on the job towards credit hours, so that helps them get their degree faster. And then second, we have partner universities that we work with to drive down the tuition on the cost side and help support our employees as well. And then secondarily, we work with them around sort of steering people towards helping them discover what the degrees are. The last piece is around education counseling. So should I go back to school? What should I go back to school for? How hard is this going to be? How do I overcome the challenges that I have in the process? We work with a group called CALE, and they provide sort of independent education counselors for people that helps them navigate the process of getting through the education system, forms, whatever it might be, enrollment, what courses should I take and when, how long is it going to take me, how do I juggle my priorities, all those things that go through people's minds when they're trying to work and get back into the education system.
So, I mean, it sounds like you're really doing a great job of meeting folks where they are, excuse me. And Haley, I know when you and I were talking about, we talk about this often, but also in preparation for the show, we were talking about how, it goes beyond like corporate social responsibility, which I know, Rob has already mentioned, but it seems that there are benefits to this going beyond just the McDonald's restaurants. And is that something you're finding generally? And
absolutely. We've done a couple studies that show that there's really positive returns to the company and also to the individuals who are taking part in the programs themselves, who are also often being promoted and transferred more. But Rob, one important, I think, characteristic of the Archways program is that in terms of the college education benefit that you offer, you're very open. In fact, your campaign around hiring is the best first job, right? Which I think is really interesting because so many companies approach this kind of work and this kind of investment as a way of keeping people around longer. And I think you do probably keep people around longer, right? The retention aspects and attraction aspects that you mentioned before. But you're also definitely preparing people for jobs outside of McDonald's in the long term. Can you explain a little bit what you think about that?
Yeah, when you look at the profile of the people that work for our company, many of them are coming to us for the first time in the employment arena. And we recognize that. And we also recognize two things. We recognize that we have great career opportunities within our franchise organizations at McDonald's and within the corporation itself. Huge opportunities there. But we also recognize that a lot of people are on their way to something else when they come into the organization and begin to work in a restaurant. So we know our restaurants are grounds where people learn how to work. Mm-hmm. They get great life skills. They get great soft skills around teamwork, communication, prioritization, scheduling, dressing for work, showing up on time, basic things like that. So we really, we recognize that, and the demographics of our people represent that. So, sort of conceding that a lot of the crew, for example, in our restaurants are on their way to something else. Our proposition is how do we get them to stay a little longer, mm-hmm. And how do we help them get on their way, to where it is that they want to go. We think that favorable employment experience sets people up with a lot of confidence for the future. And then, those folks, from a business perspective, those people have better buying power longer term and become good consumers for us down the road and good brand ambassadors.
Yeah. I think that's really important. You know, as a company with you, we talked about this earlier. 2 million people, 2 million employees globally, and about 800,000 a year. I think you have talent challenges that are even more acute than many other employers, right? I think you said there are about 100,000 job openings right now for positions within McDonald's.
Picking up where Haley was just taking us, I'm sure there's a lot of anecdotal stories of real empowerment through the kind of programming that you're offering through this. How do you quantify success, and how does McDonald's quantify success for these kinds of programs to justify the investment that you're putting in?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things we look at. Brand reputation as an employer is really important to us. So we've been watching across since our launch of Archways Opportunity in 2015. We've been watching our brand scores improve as an employer, and I think that's an uphill challenge because we've got a lagging consumer sentiment about what kind of jobs McDonald's has to offer. So the messaging out in the media about America's Best First Job really resonates well with people. Helps reinforce how we look at our work in our restaurants, as frankly, crew is not a career destination. Was never designed to be, and largely shouldn't be, because we think people can aspire to a lot higher things and make greater contributions. So for us, we look at that in terms of brand reputation. The second thing we look at is general tenure. So we look at things like 90-day turnover in our crew. We look at average tenure in restaurants. And then we look at more qualitative things like, our franchisee sentiment, for example, around the program. Are they feeling positive about it? Are they advocating for it? Are they participating in it? And we're seeing a lot of interesting movement by franchisees in terms of how they're leveraging and capitalizing on the program in their communities.
And so, you just mentioned something I think that's really critical. You said, that the crew position was never really intended to be a career. And I guess I'm wondering, I was talking not that long ago to a national but smaller medium-sized company, a logistics firm, a distribution firm. And the conversation we got into, they said, really, Dakota, what we're trying to do is we want to provide opportunities for education, but we need people to stay in the job. And the job that they were talking about was an entry-level position, essentially a kind of a picker, someone to go around the warehouse and fill orders. And their key metric of success was retention in that specific entry-level role to reduce the kind of turnover they had. And so for medium employers and small employers who might be listening to this, I guess I'm wondering, McDonald's has a privilege of scale where you can take this position, and how do you address that when you are talking to colleagues that might be running smaller, mid-sized businesses that the sense of scale they don't have as much as you all do?
Yeah, I think they have something in common with us, and that is, we'd love it if everyone would stay, forever in crew. I don't know that it's the right thing from an economic model, personally, and from a business perspective. So, so that's sort of the fundamental economic reality of the role, right? And I think a picker role is similar to that. The big question is, what's the profile of the people that you're trying to select into your restaurant or into your business for those entry-level roles? Because there is a huge swath of population out there that isn't necessarily looking for career advancement. They might be looking for great part-time work. They have other priorities in their life, like raising a family, or frankly, they're retired, or whatever it might be. That's a whole segment of the population that we're now beginning to explore as well, in terms of how we can build in more flexibility and freedom for people to work around schedules, recognizing that they have other things going on in life. So kind of beyond the student profile, we just signed we announced a partnership with ARP, for example, AARP, where we believe there's a segment of the population that can come in and work in some of those crew roles, provide fantastic hospitality for customers, work the hours that they want. And the career ambition isn't really what they're interested in. It's not the motivation for them. It's the connection into the community and the engagement with other people that they're looking for. So, so I think thinking about the profile of the people and the segments of the population that you would want to attract to the job, and then designing the job around that becomes critical. So I think that would apply to a pick-pack logistics person just as well as it applies to a McDonald's person.
Rob, I've been struck by how many times you've mentioned the word community, both in terms of, where you are, you're everywhere. And so you're a part of every single community in this nation, just about. But also in terms of your responsibility, right? That you're doing this work and you're investing in education, not only because it's going to pay off for the company specifically, but because you're going to create the next generation or value within generations that are at the end of their careers, right? In being able to give back and become more empowered consumers, more empowered citizens, right? And so I think it's a really interesting idea, right? To do this for reasons beyond brand. And maybe you could comment a little bit about how McDonald's either, views the responsibility from a corporate perspective to, help our citizenry, but also how your franchisees are thinking about themselves as community empowerers, if that's the word.
Yeah, we'll go with it.
We'll go with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'll start backwards. I think on the franchise side, the notion of being involved in the community is not a new idea. Mm-hmm. So, the majority of our franchisees are local community-owned businesses. So more than 90% in the U.S. is an example. Of McDonald's, when you drive up to one, you got a better than 90% chance that it's actually owned by a small business owner that's probably local in your community, or at least within the next town of your community. So they're engaged in Chamber of Commerce. They sponsor Little League. They do teachers' nights, law enforcement recognition days. They do those things, intentionally as members of that community. And I think that that's just core to the DNA that from the beginning of McDonald's in terms of how we've operated. On the education side, it transfers into that as well. I think on the corporate side, for us, we're very conscious in general about our scale. And we believe that we need to, and we have an obligation to leverage our scale for good. Whether that's in thinking about things like beef sustainability, believe it or not. Are we taking care of the cows, and are there enough cows, and how are ranchers, handling cows and chickens and up our supply chain? We do extensive work on that front. Things like cage-free eggs, where we're essentially going to change the entire egg production industry, which will impact you as a consumer. And then we take, we have a pillar around our scale for good around youth opportunity, and that we need to be reaching out, and we need to be doing something about addressing and creating opportunities for youth to advance economically. And so, so it extends beyond our Archways program, even into folks who are not employed by us. We have some pilot programs going in Chicago, soon in Washington as well, where we're now taking it even further into the communities where we operate, partnering with NGOs, I guess they would be, or not-for-profits. And we are, looking at how we can make an even greater impact on that youth opportunity side. And to your right, from a scale perspective, 85% of the U.S. population lives within 3 miles of a McDonald's. So we have that advantage of sort of being present and overcoming a lot of the challenges that youth face, particularly in getting access to and being able to get to, frankly, from a transportation perspective, that can be challenging. Jobs that are available to them that can give them a start on the path towards more economic mobility. So I think that's a mindset we use, that we have we need to leverage our scale for good. So it's part of how we talk about things all the time.
Yeah. And having been a part of a lot of the conversations that you've had on national stages, I would encourage everybody to go and look at some of McDonald's materials and collateral and video out there. Some of the most moving things you'll ever see, right? And one of the things that's really struck me that I think is really, really powerful is that being a part of a community and being part of a movement and being part of scale for good means that you tell the stories about the people who work for you, right? And you have to, because these are the fabric of not only the stores, but of the place. And so I just want to commend you for really highlighting and putting a spotlight on those amazing individuals who are pulling their families behind them. And I just want to point out, one great thing about your program with Archways is that you do provide the eligibility for high school completion for immediate family members of crew as well. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And I think that's just fantastic to think not only about the people you employ, but the families they go home to at night.
Yeah, I mean, the stories, will make you cry or whatever. They're, guys,
Guilty.
but I'll well up a little. But I mean, some of these stories, there's so much hunger for just the opportunity or to help find the path. People are just looking for the way up the ladder. And, I think we do a pretty good job with that. We can always be better, but I think we provide people with a path that says, here's resources, here's access, we're removing financial barriers, all the things, Haley, you and I talk about in terms of the barriers to education for people. We want to go proactively after those things. And, if people choose not to take advantage of it, we can't really do much about that. But if for the people that are really seeking the way, a different way or a better path, we turn around and say, it's here. We can do that for you. And by the way, we're not asking that you commit to the rest of your career, or you give me 8 years in exchange for the 4 years of education I'm going to provide to you. And so I think that's really powerful piece. The stories that are out there are super powerful. I mean, it's fascinating for me. The mayor and my congressional representative did not show up when I graduated high school, but some of these folks have those people, in their restaurants with their owners, shaking their hands, celebrating with them and their families, and that's really powerful for those individuals too. That people are out recognizing the accomplishment and the investment that they're making, and I think that spurs a lot of them to say, "I'm going to keep going."
And just one more thing, I think, you mentioned before that you have worked out with some of your college partners that they'll recognize the learning that McDonald's provides through Hamburger U and other on-the-job training for college credit. And speaking, of course, on behalf of Lumina, this is exactly what we're interested in, is making sure that all learning can count. I just want to commend McDonald's for making that happen and being among the first companies out there promoting this and doing that work. And I've been struck over time, a lot of folks who have been marginalized from academic systems or who've not been given the kinds of opportunities to advance through traditional academic pathways. A lot of times that on-the-job experience is their first positive academic experience in their whole lives. And so the fact that you're making a path available to them and recognizing that, yes, they are college material, I think is something that's worth holding up and shining a big spotlight on.
Yeah, we find that, if you can just unlock people's confidence, then all of a sudden they can see new possibilities. And I think that confidence in being able to master a role, master a job, and work in a team in a restaurant for the first time does help people build, that sense of self-worth and that sense of self-confidence that maybe they can do more. And so, you can talk to even the high school education program. Actually, I think especially the high school education program. If you talk to a lot of the folks in our system that have completed that program and got their high school diploma, one, they say they're going to keep going and they're going to move on to college. Two is that they were highly encouraged and highly supported by everyone around them in the restaurant in that experience. And I think that that's a really, you can't underestimate the value of that encouragement from the peers that around them. It's that psychological support system because, to your point, Haley, many of them have found it extremely difficult to be successful before in the educational system, and or they had circumstances where they had to just leave the educational system because they had more pressing things, and the educational system wasn't flexible enough to support the things that they needed to do. So I think we kind of cracked, and I'll give our partners all the credit, but I think we've cracked kind of the code on that out there now, where those barriers aren't necessarily in place anymore.
I guess one of the closing thoughts, earlier you were talking about we've been talking about scale a lot, and you were mentioning that because of the way McDonald's is starting to source its beef or its eggs and all these other things, that you're literally transforming the industry and all the way down to the production, fundamentally changing the way that industry is working. And that's similar to Lumina's goal, is to fundamentally change and redesign the system of post high school learning in the United States. And so I guess I'm wondering, can you do that for us? and I know it's kind of a fun question, but it's also a serious question. I mean, we're sitting here talking to someone right now who represents one of the largest corporations in America, who can literally transform the daily lives of people by choosing how and where you source eggs from. Can you do the same for us in education?
Yeah, it's a giant question. So thanks for that one. But I think
no pressure.
Exactly. I got to come up with something. I think I'll just say this. Haley knows I have an opinion about everything, but I'll say largely I don't play in the space of trying to redefine the educational structure. I mean, from a McDonald's perspective, we're more like I can pull out a lot of BLS data that shows that people that finish high school, people that don't finish high school, what their average income potential is. People that finish high school, people that finish 2 years, people that finish 4 years, people that finish advanced degrees. How their earnings potential changes over time, the economic contribution and implications for that, the tax revenue that the government can raise because of that increased earning, all those different things, are really important to us societally, and I think really important to us at McDonald's. I do think, on the larger stage of what would I say, the paradigm that we currently have around educational attainment. I do think that there's lots of forces at play right now, for and against sort of the current models, resisting and promoting alternative models in the system. And for me, it's really interesting to watch. Depending on your position, it's about self-preservation, in terms of promoting alternatives or resisting alternatives, as opposed to embracing where society really needs to go. But from a McDonald's perspective, largely, we'll let other people sort of sort that out, and we'll embrace whichever way the marketplace actually takes education as we go.
Well, I think it's important that you're taking advantage of as many. Look at the cup. There you go. Taking advantage of as many innovations as you can. But I am personally excited to work with you, Rob, because I think your scale does represent an impact that we will be feeling for generations to come. And I want to thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. I know you got to get going. I can hear all the calendar invites beckoning you to the next thing. So, no, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
No, happy to. Anytime.
Fantastic. Take care.
We'll talk to you soon. All right, so Haley, our next guest is coming from Cigna, right? Linda Carpenter, is that right?
Absolutely.
Linda, are you here with us?
I am. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, of course, our pleasure. Linda, why don't you introduce yourself and say hello?
Hi, I'm Linda Carpenter. I manage the educational reimbursement program at Cigna, and I've been there for about 7 years.
That's wonderful. Well, we're really grateful that you're here with us today. And maybe you can start by just explaining what the education reimbursement program is at Cigna.
Yes. So the educational reimbursement program at Cigna, or as we call it, the ERP, those acronyms, right? That is a tuition assistance, corporate tuition assistance program. It is global for Cigna. It's been around quite a long time. It's considered a benefit at Cigna, and I have managed it since 2012 when I came over to Cigna from a small company in the Nashville area called HealthSpring. Cigna acquired HealthSpring in 2012, and I've been managing the ERP program ever since.
Yeah. Well, Cigna and we've known each other now in one way or another for a long time, I feel like. And I love talking to you on the phone because your enthusiasm for this program is just palpable. I know you love what you do, and it's very clear. So Cigna was one of our first ROI analysis partners back in 2016. And I'm not positive how we found you, but thank goodness we did, because we learned that Cigna experienced 129% ROI, which was a result. The participants in the program were 10% more likely to be promoted, 7.5% more likely to be transferred into lateral positions within the company, and 8% more likely to stay with the company. And so you were, I think at the time, administering this program. What can you tell us about how Cigna thought about the education benefits program before we did the ROI analysis?
So again, I came on board in 2012. By the time that you and I met and we started the study, I'd been there about 3 years. When I came on board, Haley, right away, my leaders, as part of the corporate university structure at that time, were insistent that we build and grow our tuition reimbursement program. They didn't want it to be just another benefit, just another program. They let me know that it was going to be a top priority to get more people involved and to make the program more useful to our workforce. And so that's what I set out to do. And again, been there about 3 years when you came along, and we were glad to hear from you because we knew that you could help us in our efforts to make this program something that really stood out. We wanted to be industry leaders in this area. And so you came along at just the right time.
Well, and, as a result, I think of what we learned together, Cigna made some dramatic changes to the program, and some of which I think are now becoming almost standard operating procedure for a lot of companies that are in this work. So can you tell us some of what you changed and then, why you changed it?
Yes, so we looked at the results of the study, and a couple things kind of stood out for us. One of the things that you recommended is that we take a closer look at aligning ourselves with and partnering with other functions at Cigna, other areas that maybe we could partner with and get some leverage in terms of delivering on learning, employee growth and development, those kinds of pursuits. And so we took that quite seriously. We began to partner with other areas like talent management, talent acquisitions, career development efforts, those kinds of areas where we could really get some leverage and take a serious look at what the needs were throughout Cigna and be able to meet those more effectively. And so that was one of your recommendations. Another recommendation was that we needed to let more people know about the ERP program and the benefits of pursuing additional degrees or certifications. And so, again, we took that seriously and we made efforts in our communications, we came up with a communication plan to make the ERP better known. The third thing that we set out to do is to make our program easier to use. We had gotten some feedback that, maybe we could improve in that area so that people found our program, the ERP, easier to access, easier to file tuition and reimbursement claims or requests. And as a result, we want to increase our usership or our participation, the employee participation in the ERP program. The final thing we did is that we wanted to, and this again is based on your recommendations, the recommendations of the study, we wanted to make sure that our efforts were completely aligned with the business strategies of Cigna. So how did we do that? We identified a number of areas, programs of study, and certifications that we knew aligned with the initiatives and the focus of Cigna at that time in 2016 going forward. And so we identified these areas, and they included such areas as project management, data analytics, finance and accounting, healthcare administration, nursing. These were areas that we identified as being particularly critical for the long-term success of Cigna's business plan. So we identified these areas, and then we attached a higher tuition cap to those areas to get people to take these areas and these programs and studies and certifications so that they were better prepared to address Cigna's business needs. Of course, they were not necessarily compelled to do it, but they chose to do it by virtue of this little carrot that we provided. And we have seen, as a result, people are really choosing these areas because they know that not only can they get more support in these areas, but they can also, too, have a bigger role in Cigna's long-term, ongoing success.
Haley, so when I hear that we found that there was a 129% return on investment for this kind of program, I think about getting a 129% return on my 401k.
I wish.
And that sounds like a lot. So, I guess, one, were we surprised to see that it was 129%? And does that match what you find with other employers, or are we still uncovering what's our suspicion around what a normal return on investment for this kind of investment talent is?
Yeah, Cigna was our first study, the first one that we started, the first one that we released, although ultimately we did 5. And we found, Cigna had some extraordinary results. But one of the things that you said, Linda, which I think is really important, which is that you kind of got these results without really having tried very hard. And so a lot of it was that, Cigna's the kind of company that, it's a good place to work. Cigna has I think a culture that has valued education for a long time. But that folks who are participating in the program were seeing opportunities for themselves, right? And one of the things that we had really focused in on in the study, and I'd encourage you to take a look, it's still up online, and this is something I want to get back to what you said, Linda. For frontline employees, those who were working in the more entry-level jobs, the return was actually higher than 129%. It was actually evened out by the value that was sort of not being detracted, but the lower value of participation for those who were in management and executive positions. So this was actually more valuable for the frontline worker, which was that really started a whole new way of thinking about it for us. So this experience that we had with Linda and her team was just incredibly valuable. But one of the things that you said in your comments, Linda, which I think is so important, which was that you developed a communication plan about the program. Mm-hmm. And this is something that if I had a nickel for every time I asked a company, where is this advertised? They'd looked at me and said, advertised? What are you talking about? No, it's in the employee handbook. And I said, well, how often do you look at your employee handbook?
Right. And also, Linda, you also started, when you were describing the program, I noted that you said that this is tuition assistance and not tuition reimbursement. Can you clarify what that might mean to someone who isn't as actively involved or maybe considering this kind of program?
So we do offer both. We do offer programs that are predicated upon that tuition reimbursement kind of standard format, standard programming. So we do have some of that as well. We do have a set of partners, educational institutions that we work with. And for our top tier partners, the ones we work most closely with, we do require that they offer some kind of deferment of tuition up front so that people, as you mentioned, who may be struggling maybe to participate, there's always that hurdle to get over, that initial outlay of cash that a lot of us don't have. And so we require our closest partners to defer tuition until such time that our employees can file for tuition reimbursement and then subsequently pay them. It's still their responsibility to pay, but they're relieved from that upfront out-of-pocket burden initially. And so we have found that that has been useful to help more people participate. Number two, we also have several programs that are predicated on no out-of-pocket cost up front. We have a program with the University of Hartford, an MBA program. It's based on a cohort type of format. And so we ask them to help us get people involved by waiting for those tuition dollars to come in. And it has worked quite well. I think we're about to start our fourth cohort there. And then we also too have a special program with Northwestern University in Illinois. And we are working with them on the data analytics sector. They're offering a data analytics, graduate data analytics certification. And so we have been very successful in that arena as well. And so we are doing everything we can to make it easy for people to participate in the ERP program by eliminating those upfront costs.
Yeah. And that really has become a program, almost not even a leading indicator, but every new program that we have taken a look at recently that's getting any kind of positive press is going to have that component, because it really does take into account the fact that it is really difficult at a lot of different income levels to come up with the kind of cash you need to fund even a semester's worth of college.
I mean, you're my supervisor, and right before we recorded the show, you signed my tuition reimbursement form, and I'll tell you, that would be a benefit. I mean, even here at Lumina.
Yeah, it's so interesting. But so, Linda, I mean, over the course of the adaptations and innovations you've made to your program, you really have come up with things that I would advise almost any company to take a look at. Right, upfront payment, right, assistance rather than reimbursement, the kind of alignment to strategic business needs. A lot of companies are really trying to think about, those large entry-level employers will sometimes take a look and say, you know what, I want to make a pipeline to all jobs in the economy. But for an insurance company, a healthcare services company, you really need to think about your own future, the innovation that's driving the success of your company. So that alignment with the business needs is really important. And then, of course, the really measured approach you've taken to increasing the cap for the work that you find most strategically aligned. So beyond those things, what advice would you give to other companies that are considering building out or adapting their existing programs?
So I think, I know that we did some looking at other companies and organizations to find out what they're doing, what may be cutting edge, what may be different, to get some ideas as we begin to take a look at, changing our program. And there were some good ideas out there. I mean, I've talked to people at McDonald's, at IBM, at Walmart that were involved in the education, learning sector in those companies. And we've exchanged ideas and chatted over the years about the challenges and the joys of managing such a program as this. And so that's always been fun and interesting to get ideas from others. Number two, I would just really recommend that as my fellow learning professionals set out to develop their programs, that they take a look at setting up measures for evaluation right up front. It's really hard to get this information after the fact unless you set things up very carefully ahead of time. And of course, Haley, you know that we had a few minor struggles in that area during the course of the study because, of course, sometimes people don't consider the ultimate need to get information out of these programs at the back end. And so I cannot stress too carefully the need to consider evaluation and measurement when you are setting up your programs. It will be so useful to you in the long run.
Yeah, I could not agree more.
Yeah, and we were talking about that earlier about how that's even more difficult in businesses that use a franchise model and where the education support and programming is happening at the franchise level. And so it makes getting any kind of data that's useful very difficult for program evaluation, for program tweaking, let alone doing a good ROI analysis.
Well, and it's not just difficult for decentralized businesses. It can be difficult for major companies that have large corporate workforces as well. It's just a matter of, did you collect the data? Did you collect it in a way that it's discoverable and findable? And did you collect it in a way that you can attach to, this program participation so you really can evaluate it? But Linda, I couldn't agree more. And, I think you've become such an expert in this space that you're going and using the program yourself and getting your doctorate. And I want to say you're getting your doctorate in this subject. So what wisdom can you shower down upon us from your perch as not only a professional, but a student in this space?
I feel so lucky to be working for Cigna with their generous tuition assistance. That makes all the difference.
Oh, yeah.
It really does make all the difference. And so that's why I'm in the program. I'm completing my third year of my PhD program in organizational leadership. The important aspects of that program are organizational learning, and even more important is an emphasis on change management. In today's environment, global business, rapid change, and the need to be agile, flexible, immediately responsive, and certainly we've seen that at Cigna. We're in the middle of a merger right now, so there are so many changes going on, and I just have to say that our leadership is really keyed into supporting the ability of our people to meet these change challenges by promoting and supporting a growth mindset, by helping those of us who are in learning, and in particular the ERP program, to support the efforts to stay abreast of all these changes and all these innovations that are taking place in today's global business society. And so my PhD program helps me to understand how to manage everything and how to take a lot of these needs into consideration. And so I feel good about where I'm headed in terms of, I still have quite a long ways to go. A comprehensive exam. I have just a couple classes left. And then, of course, the big dissertation. And as you know, Haley, I've mentioned to you that I would love to write my dissertation on and do some research on what has transpired at Cigna and corporate tuition assistance programs in general.
Wow. Teaser.
Well, we will be avid readers of such a dissertation, and certainly with your program, it sounds like whenever we do our episode on the future of learning and work, that you might be a good person to revisit with. Yeah. But I think we need to leave it here today. Linda Carpenter, thanks so much for spending some time with us and explaining all the great work that you're doing at Cigna.
Yeah, you're great. Thank you so much.
It's been fun. Yes, it's been fun. Thank you so much.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
So, Haley, some really great conversations today with a lot of really good folks. What are you walking away with?
Yeah, I cannot underscore enough how exciting it is to see the private sector stepping up in this way. We're not anywhere near scale, but with folks from companies like McDonald's and Walmart and Discover and Cigna, we are seeing the start of a movement. And so what I want to leave folks with is that, this is not a field of dreams moment. If you build it, they will not come. You have to really be proactive in thinking not only about the structure of your education programs, but how you're making those programs available and accessible to the people who need them. right? So do not hide these programs away in your handbook, because you know exactly how many times a year folks will look at their employee handbook, right? And as you're thinking through them, really have that firm idea in your head about not only why are you doing it, but how can you make sure you're sharing? Never hide your light under a bushel. There are so many great positive things to be gained from a business perspective, as well as from a brand perspective. I just encourage more companies to start raising their hands and saying, please, I want to be recognized for this, because you're doing great work.
Yeah, and each of these companies, I think, came to their particular programs for different reasons, but they all have been learning from each other and doing a really good job of documenting not only that learning, but some of the results. And I think that's the other message we want to leave people with, is that no matter the size of your company, that there's support and resources out there to help you think through those things.
Absolutely. I was at a conference maybe a month or two ago, and one of the things a corporate learning leader said from the stage was, we compete on everything. But we don't compete on this, right? There is a sharing environment amongst corporate learning people that just doesn't exist when it comes to, profits or shareholders and that kind of thing. And there are resources to learn from. And we would actually encourage you, do check out our ROI studies. And we are actually now in process of refreshing that page with some brand new information, capitalizing on all the things we've learned more recently. So check out luminafoundation.org. And we encourage you to follow us and ask questions on Twitter. You can find me at Haley Glover 17.
Yeah, and you can find me at Dakota Palicki. And Haley, thanks so much for bringing this topic today. This was a really fun show, and I hope some folks get something out of it.
I do too. I think they will.
All right, that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.